When a quiet homeowner installs a simple wheelchair ramp for safety, their HOA erupts into chaos. Secret recordings, escalating threats, and a stunning court reversal expose corruption nobody saw coming. Let me start from beginning. The ramp had been installed only 4 days before the first notice appeared, tucked neatly under the front doormat as if someone hoped it would go unseen. The homeowner had anticipated small adjustments and perhaps a few questions, but nothing prepared them for the unrelenting tone radiating from the HOA's printed accusation. According to the board, the newly installed wheelchair ramp, built solely for accessibility and safety, was labeled an unauthorized exterior structure that disrupted neighborhood uniformity. The letter demanded removal within 10 days. Even at first read, the phrasing carried an unmistakable air of self-importance, as though the board believed their authority superseded logic, compassion, and even federal protections. Yet the homeowner had already grown familiar with the HOA's reputation for micromanagement. Neighbors often whispered about outdated rulebooks that gave the board power to scrutinize garden decorations and seasonal wreaths. This ramp, however, was not a whimsy of aesthetics but a necessity for mobility, an entirely different matter. The homeowner decided not to respond immediately, observing quietly instead. That's when the second notice came, far more aggressive than the first. It claimed the ramp violated multiple sections of the community's handbook, many of which hadn't been updated in over a decade. The board's hostility seemed to grow with each printed page, and neighbors began offering their own warnings about the HOA president, known locally as the enforcer. Her stance on rules was notoriously rigid, and nobody doubted she planned to make an example out of someone eventually. It appeared this ramp had become her chosen battleground. The homeowner took note of every file, every letter, every timestamp. Recordings were captured discreetly, moments when HOA representatives hovered near the property, speaking under their breath, unaware an audio device was nearby. Their comments revealed irritation rather than genuine concern, and several remarks hinted that the ramp was considered unsightly or poorly aligned with the neighborhood's values. That phrase alone revealed more about their motivations than any handbook could. Meanwhile, the ramp remained unused, a symbol of both independence and defiance. Its sturdy construction stood in stark contrast to the flimsy accusations aimed at it. The tension began to ripple through the community as neighbors whispered openly about what the HOA was attempting. Many privately admitted they saw nothing wrong with the ramp and believed the board had finally overstepped its authority. Their support, however, remained mostly quiet, as few wished to challenge the president directly. By the third notice, the HOA declared that failure to remove the ramp would result in escalating fines and potential eviction action. The threat felt deliberately dramatic, crafted to frighten someone into compliance. But this resident had no intention of surrendering mobility rights to a committee more focused on aesthetics than accessibility. The notices were collected, scanned, and filed carefully. Every recording was transcribed. Every observation was documented in chronological order. The homeowner knew exactly what to do next. They reached out to an attorney specializing in disability rights. The attorney's immediate response was clear and confident. The HOA had violated multiple federal protections, including the Fair Housing Act. The ramp was not an unauthorized structure but a legally protected accommodation. Any attempt to force its removal was not only unethical but illegal. As the attorney prepared the formal response, the homeowner continued gathering evidence, including footage of the HOA president walking up the driveway to inspect the ramp, measuring tape in hand, muttering to another board member about keeping the neighborhood from looking modified. The footage captured every word clearly. By the end of the week, the HOA received their first legal correspondence. The letter demanded immediate withdrawal of all notices, cessation of harassment, and full acknowledgement of the homeowner's right to maintain the ramp. It also warned that failure to comply could result in legal damages. The board responded with predictable indignation, sending an email blast to the entire community claiming they were under attack by a homeowner who refused to follow reasonable guidelines. But the tide had already begun shifting. Neighbors whispered. Screenshots circulated. People questioned why a safety ramp had become such a target. The homeowner watched everything unfold with measured patience, knowing the real showdown was approaching. The next board meeting was scheduled in just a few days, and tensions were building noticeably. As the evening of the meeting approached, the homeowner prepared one more thing: the recordings. Video, audio, documentation. All of it organized in a single folder. The stage was set. The clubhouse was already buzzing when the homeowner arrived. a soft murmur rolling across the room like distant thunder. Folding chairs had been arranged in hastily assembled rows, and the board members sat elevated behind a long table, shoulders squared with ceremonial confidence. But the air felt charged differently tonight. Neighbors who rarely attended these gatherings had shown up, drawn either by rumor or curiosity. Eyes shifted toward the homeowner as they entered, many offering small nods of support. The HOA president opened the meeting with a stern attempt at authority, reading from a printed agenda designed to downplay the tension. Only near the bottom, tucked between landscaping updates and pool maintenance, sat the vague line item labeled structural compliance issue. The minimization was obvious, a calculated attempt to reframe the situation as mundane. But the residents knew better. Their attention sharpened, their posture stiffened. When the agenda reached that final line, the president launched into a rehearsed statement about community appearance, adherence to guidelines, and the board's duty to maintain order. She spoke as though the ramp were a rebellious act rather than an essential medical accommodation. Her tone suggested she believed the audience would side with her simply because she projected confidence. But the homeowner waited patiently, allowing the president to complete her monologue. Once she finished, the attorney, attending virtually, was given permission to speak. What followed shifted the entire tone of the meeting. The attorney calmly outlined federal law, citing specific provisions protecting accessibility modifications. They noted the board's repeated violations, the harassment embedded in their notices, and the documented proof the homeowner had collected. Not a single point relied on interpretation. Each was backed by statute, precedent, and undisputable evidence. The room grew noticeably still as the attorney continued, and several board members exchanged uneasy glances. But it was the moment the recordings were played that shattered the facade of professionalism the HOA president had tried to maintain. Her voice, captured clearly, described the ramp as an eyesore, a risk to property values, and a dangerous precedent if others wanted similar accommodations. Each statement undercut her earlier claims of objective enforcement. Gasps rippled through the audience. Some residents leaned forward in disbelief. Others looked outright horrified. The board members shifted uncomfortably. The president's expression tightened, but her silence revealed everything. She knew she had been caught. The attorney continued, revealing the timeline of harassment, the repeated attempts to intimidate the homeowner, and the thinly veiled threats of eviction. Then came the final blow, the announcement that a formal complaint had already been filed with the state's housing authority. The HOA could face significant fines, mandatory training, and civil liability unless they immediately reverse course. At this point, the president attempted to reclaim control, speaking over the attorney with frantic explanations about preserving uniformity. But her words lacked the confidence she once wielded. Audience members murmured among themselves, many shaking their heads. The board's misjudgment had become undeniable. The homeowner remained quiet, observing each shift in expression and tone. They had entered this meeting prepared for confrontation but were now witnessing the board's authority unravel in real time. The president called for a closed-door recess, her voice quivering with forced composure, and the board members retreated into a side room. Through the thin walls, muffled arguments erupted, betraying their internal panic. Outside, neighbors approached the homeowner with hushed encouragement. Some admitted they had been afraid of the president's overreach for years. Others confessed relief that someone had finally confronted her. A growing sense of collective awakening filled the clubhouse. People realized the board's authority was not absolute. After nearly half an hour, the board returned, visibly shaken. Their spokesperson, no longer the president, delivered a carefully worded statement. It announced that all notices regarding the ramp would be formally withdrawn, that the HOA would review its accessibility policies, and that further discussion on the matter was pending legal counsel. The phrasing tried to mask retreat as procedure, but everyone recognized it for what it was: surrender. The meeting adjourned shortly after, but the story was far from over. The homeowner stepped outside into the cool evening air, feeling equal parts exhausted and vindicated. They knew the board's retreat was temporary. Bureaucracies rarely accepted accountability without resistance. Their attorney had already warned them that additional retaliation was possible. And with the president's pride wounded, the aftermath could become unpredictable. The ramp stood steady on the porch that night, illuminated softly by the porch light, its presence more symbolic than ever. It had become the axis of a larger battle, one that was only shifting gears, not ending. And as dawn approached the next morning, a new letter appeared in the mailbox, proving the conflict was far from resolved. The letter that arrived the next morning attempted to strike a tone of bureaucratic neutrality, but the underlying intent was unmistakable. The HOA claimed it needed additional review to determine whether the ramp met community standards, implying the board had not fully abandoned its challenge. It was an unmistakable sign of the president's refusal to concede, even as her authority weakened. The homeowner forwarded the letter to their attorney, who responded with calm irritation. By now, the case file had grown thick with evidence: recordings, notices, transcripts, meeting minutes, and eyewitness statements from neighbors who had witnessed the board's conduct. The attorney prepared a formal demand package outlining the damages sought: reimbursement for emotional distress, coverage of legal fees, and compensation for discriminatory practices. The HOA was given a strict deadline to respond. Word of the potential lawsuit spread quickly through the neighborhood. Residents whispered on sidewalks, forwarded screenshots in private group chats, and began openly questioning the president's leadership. Several board members scheduled emergency meetings without her, seeking ways to distance themselves. The once confident president found herself increasingly isolated, her control slipping through her fingers as the community shifted against her. Meanwhile, the homeowner continued documenting everything. The ramp remained undisturbed, though the president made multiple slow drives past the property, her vehicle lingering longer than necessary. Cameras recorded each pass. The footage was added to the growing archive. As the deadline approached, the HOA's attorney finally responded, attempting to negotiate a settlement that reduced the board's financial liability. But the homeowner's attorney rejected the proposal, citing the seriousness of the violations. The State Housing Authority had taken interest, assigning an investigator who began reviewing the case in detail. The investigator requested interviews, photographs, and all relevant correspondence. Their involvement signaled a shift from private dispute to formal inquiry. Under pressure, cracks formed rapidly within the HOA leadership. One board member resigned abruptly. Another leaked internal messages that revealed the president's long-standing resistance to accessibility modifications. Screenshots showed she had previously blocked similar accommodations from other residents, accusing them of trying to change the character of the neighborhood. This pattern of behavior deepened the case against the HOA and heightened the seriousness of the investigation. When the Housing Authority issued its preliminary findings, the results were damning. The report detailed violations of the Fair Housing Act, documented harassment, improper threats of eviction, and discriminatory enforcement practices. It recommended restitution for the homeowner and mandatory reforms within the HOA, including training, oversight, and revised policies. Faced with these findings, the HOA had no option but to capitulate. A settlement was finalized shortly after, requiring the board to pay several $1,000s in damages, cover all attorney fees, and issue a formal written apology acknowledging wrongdoing and discrimination. The ramp's legality was reaffirmed, protected not only by federal law but now also by explicit HOA policy revisions. The president, stripped of support, resigned in humiliation. Her final statement attempted to deflect blame, claiming misunderstandings and miscommunication, but the community no longer accepted her narrative. The recordings, documents, and final report told a different story, one rooted in control, bias, and an attempt to assert authority at the expense of someone's basic rights. Neighbors celebrated quietly but sincerely. Some brought small gifts, a plant, a card, freshly baked cookies, symbols of solidarity and apology for the stress the homeowner had endured. Others expressed gratitude, recognizing that the homeowner's perseverance had accomplished something larger than a personal victory. It had forced the HOA to confront its own flaws and reshape the community so future residents would not face similar discrimination. The ramp, once a source of conflict, now stood as an emblem of resilience. Its presence reminded everyone that accessibility was not an infringement on neighborhood aesthetics but a necessary component of inclusive living. Its sturdy rails and smooth incline reflected more than construction materials. They reflected a battle fought with patience, documentation, and unwavering resolve. Months later, the community transformed noticeably. New board members were elected, each promising transparency and fairness. Policies were rewritten to encourage support rather than punishment. Neighbors who once feared the president's scrutiny now felt free to enjoy their homes without constant surveillance. And the homeowner, though exhausted by the ordeal, found a quiet satisfaction in knowing they had changed more than their own circumstances. They had shifted the culture of the entire neighborhood, creating space for compassion where rigidity once reigned. The ramp remained, not just as an accommodation, but as a testament to the power of standing firm when confronted with injustice, and with the HOA's payment transferred, the case closed, and the president long gone, the homeowner finally felt what had been missing since the first notice appeared: peace. The story had ended exactly where it should, on the ramp that started it all. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more.